Hello and welcome to the official ranking of the Celebrity Traitors Season 1. And guys, what a season. What have we just witnessed? Have we just witnessed an event in television history that we will never ever forget for the rest of our lives? What a sensational moment. I mean, it's one of the highest watched TV shows, at least in the last 10 years. It's crazy. It's sensational television, and today we are going to be ranking all of the Celebrity Traitors from best to worst, at least in my opinion. So again, if you guys disagree with my opinions, make sure to comment down below. Be nice, don't be mean, and let's all have a fun time, because obviously this is going to be controversial to some people, and this is just my opinion and my views on the game. So make sure you understand that, okay? Let's get into it. So, as you can see on the screen, we actually have a little bit of a spruce up. If you've been on the channel for a while, you'll know that we used to put Meh and Got Lucky in the same category together, but after the outrage on the last one, I've had to split them up, guys. I've had to. Okay, I've had to split them up. And also, we've changed Poor Player to just abysmal because I feel like there's a lot of people that could be abysmal on this list, you know what I mean? Now, we are talking about this purely in a gameplay perspective. We're not talking about how likable they were. We're not talking about how lovely they were. We're not talking about how dreadful they were in terms of personality. We're talking purely about how well or how badly they played the game. So, with that saying, Paloma Faith, oh, bless her. Oh, bless Paloma. I mean, really, her only sin was being mates with Alan Carr, wasn't it? I mean, she was the dreaded first murder, and I almost was interested to see how Paloma would have gotten on if she hadn't have been murdered first. I think that would have been a really interesting sort of way to just spruce the series up a little bit, because Paloma Faith, she is a little bit of a troublemaker. She does like to throw a roar in every now and then, and it would have been nice to see her at a round table. But, alas, she was the dreaded curse. There's something on your face, Paloma. So, unfortunately, she does have to go in not enough time. It's a shame, it really is. But it is what it is at the end of the day. It is what it is. Now, again, with Niko, I think the issue with him is, again, I feel like he came in on the back foot because he didn't have a lot of connections in the castle, first of all, and that can be potentially against you. But equally, his background in terms of YouTube, the fact that he plays these kind of games on YouTube and they get millions of views and everybody knows that he's an incredible liar, it would be difficult to trust this kind of person in the game. And I've said before that I would also want to vote him out as soon as possible, just in case he is a faithful or a traitor. Doesn't matter. I don't want him in the game because I know he's good at lying. I know he is, okay? I think there's a difference between acting and lying. That's very different for me. I think actors can sometimes be dreadful liars when they're pretending to be themselves, or they are themselves. But when they're a different person, it's easier to take on that persona. But with Niko, I did find that purely because he was himself, it did potentially throw up red flags with other people. Now, we've spoken before about unconscious bias and things like that, and I would like to believe that that is not the case, but obviously it's always going to be a lingering question in the back of everyone's minds. But realistically, I think that he was voted out because he's notorious for being good at these games, and it's just easier to get rid of him day one because it survives another day in the game for you. So next up, we have Tom Daley. I think Tom Daley, unfortunately, was meh. I think his issue was he came out with all of these bold claims very, very quickly and was like, I think it's this person, I think it's this person, I think it's this person. But they were kind of just based off of nothing, and then it ends up getting him killed. So you really have to ride a fine line between being vocal about your opinions, but also not being too quiet that the traitors will be like, they'll never get banished at the round table. And I think that Tom was a little bit too vocal about his opinions, and maybe he was getting a little bit too close potentially, and maybe because he was outspoken they saw him as a threat. So I'm going to put him in meh. I mean, listen, personally, I'd put him in iconic just for the whole, that was incredible television, But for gameplay wise, unfortunately, I would have liked to see more of him, but I feel like we had enough time with him that I didn't feel like I didn't get to know him. We had episodes 1, 2, and then he was killed at the start of 3, or like midway through 3. So I feel like I had enough time to know whether he was going to be good or bad at the game, and I don't think he was. Anyway, up next, we have Tamika. I think, unfortunately, again, Tamika played a bit of a meh game, and I think she fell into the unfortunate trap of, I'm getting blamed, so I must be defensive, and I must then attack the person attacking me. And that, I think, is ultimately what got her banished. Mark was coming after her with quite strong, compelling evidence that was not really founded on anything, but could be if everyone was like, that's interesting, let me vote for her. Again, I think she kind of got unlucky, if anything, and we don't have a got lucky category, so unfortunately, or got unlucky even, so therefore she's got to go in meh. I think that strategy of, I'm having to defend myself, so I'm going to blame the person who's attacking me, instantly makes you look like a traitor, because it makes you seem like you don't have your own thoughts, and it makes it seem like it's almost a revenge tactic. And unfortunately, Tamika just fell into that trap and unfortunately got herself banished. Again, 4 out of, 16 votes, which is only a quarter of the table voted for her. So it wasn't even like it was a clean sweep. It was just unfortunate that she ended up with the most amount of votes. I think the second most was 3. So really, it was just unfortunate for her. Now, Ruth, I'm putting in abysmal. I genuinely think she's a dreadful player. And do you know why I think she's a dreadful player? Because she just came up with so many... I mean, first of all, she was correct about Jonathan. But I can't give you props for being correct about Jonathan when it's for all the wrong reasons. For, like, literally all of the wrong reasons. You accuse him of being a traitor because he made a pact before they'd even picked the traitors. And then when he couldn't remember that pact, you sort of... an alliance, sorry. You sort of claimed he was a traitor because he was lying. Well, maybe he just wasn't remembering because it was not serious in his brain. He was just trying to be nice to you and Niko. I think that her downfall was going so hard after Jonathan with so little evidence, and it got her killed. And she claims that, like, oh yeah, I was killed because nobody knew me in that castle. No, you overplayed your hand in episode 3 and you got voted off for it, or you got murdered for it because you were seen as a threat. That's what happened in this game. If you look at other people like Nick or Joe, they didn't overplay their hand so early on in the game and blatantly accuse somebody like that, because they knew that they had to keep their opinions to themselves in order to make it further in the game. Otherwise, the traitors would just kill you. And so if you feel like somebody is a traitor, you can't go hard after them at the round table unless other people are, because that's when you can just drive the nail in the coffin. You can't be the leader of that charge because that puts you in massive jeopardy. And unfortunately for Ruth, that's exactly what it did. And I can't defend her gameplay. I think she was absolutely dreadful. And I knew she was going to go in the first couple of episodes, mostly because of the edit. But that round table where she accused Jonathan, I was like, yeah, you're gone. You're gone. You're goodbye. Goodbye. Claire, I think I would put Claire in meh as well. I think, again, she had decent ideas, but there were so many moments where I was like, Claire, what are you doing, bestie? Pulling the lever in the challenge. That made you look like a traitor, bestie. Obviously, people are going to bring that up and get you banished. There was something else as well. I can't remember exactly what Alan said to her, but she did have some good thoughts. She thought Alan potentially could be the person to kill Paloma because it was the least likely person. I was like, yeah, slay. But she never went anywhere with that theory. She never followed it along. It was simply just, oh, here's a statement. Let me throw it out into the universe and see whether it sticks. And it didn't. And you didn't move it along. And then with Jonathan, you went up against a titan, okay? You went up against a titan and you lost because you couldn't articulate yourself well enough. And I think that's the issue. She seemed like she was having to defend herself, whereas Jonathan didn't seem like he was defending himself at all. He felt like he was just explaining why he wasn't a traitor rather than defending why he wasn't a traitor. Does that make sense? I think there's a clear distinction between the two. But either way, I think Claire, she played a decent game, but I can't put her in strong. I really can't put her in strong. Up next, we have Charlotte Church. I think Charlotte Church got lucky to get where she was. She did Absolutely diddly squat. Absolutely nothing. Hilariously wrong around the round table. Great admissions, but she was lucky to have made it as far as she did. I think if she wasn't murdered that night, I think she would have been banished at some point. So really, it was unfortunate, but she had to go. She had to go at some point. She was never making it that far into the competition. The edit on her was quite minimal, and yeah, it's a shame. It really is. But Charlotte Church just didn't add much more than making the dads in the audience's eyes perk up every now and then whenever she was on screen. So I just think that she did the best that she could. No, I don't even believe that, to be honest, because she was hilariously wrong around the round table, like I said. Did she even vote once correctly for a traitor? I don't think so. Anyway, up next we have... Oh, Mark Bonner. Again, I feel like I have to put him in Got Lucky, purely because, if anything, he got unlucky with the whole banishment and the fact that it came down to a 50-50. I think it was unfortunate, but hey, game's the game. I think I can't put him in Meh because I found his approach to the game interesting and unique, but I think it would have worked better in the civilian version than the celebrity version. Because I have to be honest, every time they voted out some of the faithful, everyone was like, oh, damn, that's a shame. And he's like, fuck's sake, man, it's so fucking stupid. I don't know why I've gone to Newcastle and not to Scotland, but you know what I mean. He's always like so over the top in his reactions, and that's ultimately what got him caught. I think I'm going to change it to got lucky / got unlucky, just because I feel like Mark definitely fits in that sort of that phrase, which actually means I think I'm going to move Tamika down to here and put her... I'm going to put Mark above her, but I'm going to put Tamika there. Purely because Tamika did get fairly voted out, but Mark went home to a 50-50 shot. So I have to give him a little bit of credit, do you know what I mean? Anyway, up next we have Joe W. I think Joe W played a strong game. He was one of the architects of the big dog theory. And he also believed that it was potentially Jonathan. And I can't remember, did he think it was Kat potentially? It's been a while now since Joe W's left, so I've forgotten all of his thoughts. But I'm fairly certain he was pretty on the money with a lot of his thinking. I don't think he clocked onto Alan. His whole thing about David was an interesting shout. I think he just picked the wrong person. His idea about David was kind of applicable to Kat, and he just didn't quite navigate that well enough. He did get murdered, and it was a shame. But equally, I think he played a really, really strong game up until that point, and it was just a shame that he got taken out when he did. If he'd have survived further in the game, I think him and Joe W would have been an incredibly strong and deadly duo. But equally, I think that his death kind of helped push Joe M into making that push towards Jonathan as well. So really, you could say that Joe W's death was kind of important to the game. So strong game, I'd say. Very, very strong game indeed. Up next, we have Stephen Fry. So torn where to put him. Part of me wants to put him here, and I will defend why I'm going to put him here. Was he wrong around the round table? Yes. Okay, he was wrong around the round table, but the reason I'm putting him in strong game is because he approached the game in ways that I've not seen the game played before. And that's why I wanted to put him in strong game. He was constantly trying to get everybody to think about certain individual things. There was one round table where he was like, we cannot think logically. We have to think who we think it is based on gut feeling. Let's just vote straight away. And I was like, that's an interesting idea. Just vote on vibes. Because actually, you might find that you pick up on a traitor. You just get a traitor out somehow. Or you get another faithful out. And I know that they would have had to have a round table. But Stephen very much picked up on the fact that the round table was controlling people's votes. And very much influencing people's decisions. And therefore, maybe they should just vote with no talking based on what people genuinely think. So that we know where everybody stands based on their own individual thoughts. That's an approach that we've not seen to the game before. Me personally, I would have liked to have done the vote and then have the round table discussion and then see who wants to change their vote. I think that would have been very, very interesting to watch. But he also came up with the traitors must be sleep deprived cat. And I was like, wow, that came out of nowhere. I think also the way that he led round tables and didn't get voted off, I think was a good plan for him, because it meant that he was in that sort of power position, but equally he was such a big person that if the traitors wanted to kill him off, it would have thrown suspicion onto them because of the big dog theory. So actually, I feel like he played a strong game in the fact that he was never downplaying the fact that he could be a traitor. He was just always downplaying the fact that he isn't a traitor. Okay, does that make sense? Like, he wasn't saying, I can't be a traitor, I can't be a traitor. He was saying, I am not a traitor. I think I'm just waffling at this point, actually. I really am just waffling. I know what I mean in my head, and that's what's so difficult to articulate. But I think he did play a strong game. I just don't think he played a legendary game. And that's why I put him at the bottom of strong game, because, again, the big dog theory always meant that Jonathan or Stephen was going to go at some point. It just depended on what order. But it kept him around long enough into the game that he was able to make an impact. Even though he was wrong with his votes, I do believe that that isn't the be-all and end-all of what makes a strong player. Does that make sense? I think it's also about the ideas that you bring to the table, the new thinking, the different avenues that you can look down. And that was what Stephen was constantly bringing to the table. Let's think about this. Let's think about this. Let's think about this. And that is what helped a lot of conversations move along and not become just a, I think it's you, I think it's you, I think it's you. It was actually getting people to think logically and clearly. Now, the next person on this list is Lucy Beaumont. I got to put her in there. In fact, I got to put her at the bottom of there. Because, like, I don't think she played a good game at all. I think she was playing a good, faithful game in terms of making it towards the end. And I think it just sucked that she ended up being in that trio of Nick and Kate. Just didn't serve her very well, and unfortunately she was the easy pick out of the three of them. Again, people were concerned about why they kept Nick around, but at that point I don't think they saw Nick as a threat, whereas Lucy was actively blaming Jonathan and had actively voted for Jonathan, whereas Nick hadn't. So therefore at that point I would probably have wanted to get rid of Lucy as well if I was a traitor and I didn't know everything that we know as an audience. So Lucy unfortunately just fell victim to that. And I think, again, she had some good shouts, but she was just never sure of herself. And that's what was so, like, troublesome about her time in the game, is that she always was confused and, oh, I'm not sure, I don't know what to do, I don't know where I'm going. And she would constantly change her vote at the round table because she was just so unsure. And I think that kind of indecisiveness in a player is actually detrimental to the group, because you can never really get a certain sure vote from them. Do you know what I mean? So Lucy played a decent game, but like meh. She went at the right time, I feel like. I couldn't imagine her in the end game. Up next we had Jonathan Ross. We got to put him up in legendary. Guys, bro was a sensational traitor. Absolutely sensational. I don't know many people with the balls to be like, let's just kill off the person that's actively blaming me around the round table. Let's just do it. Let's just do it because I feel like I can handle the pressure. And he did handle the pressure for about 4 round tables. 4 round tables later, he got banished. 4. That is crazy. That is absolutely crazy. That's genuinely baffling to me. I've never seen a traitor be able to defend himself so well in my whole life. Genuinely, I was shocked. I was so unbelievably shocked. Genuinely, I was like, what are we doing here? And everyone in the audience is like, oh, these faithful are so dumb. No, Jonathan's just very smart. He's a super fan of the show. He's watched it. He knows what kind of words to use, what kind of phrases to use. He's always said, hey, if you're going to look at me, that's absolutely fine. You have to look at everybody. That's exactly what a faithful would say. A traitor would not want you to be looking at them. A traitor would get defensive. Or, as he's doing, not get defensive. Do you know what I mean? And then when he's round the round table, every single thing he said was measured, was thought out, was explained, was calm, I feel like. There were very, very few moments where I felt Jonathan got flustered around that round table. And I just think that he played a sensational game. Bro was called out in the 2nd round table, went home in the 6th, okay? Was called out in the 2nd, okay, as a traitor. That is incredible. That's genuinely sensational. I have to give him his flowers because he made it so exciting to watch, to see how is he going to survive today? How is he going to survive today? How is he going to get himself out of this scrape? And how is he going to convince others that it isn't him? Even when Stephen was voted out, there was still a question mark around whether Jonathan was actually a traitor or not. And that was what was so good about him, is he was so good at just like turning people away from him. And he never did it by blaming somebody else as well, which is a classic traitor faux pas. They'll go, I'm not a traitor, but you are. And that's kind of what Tamika fell into the trap of, by just blaming the person who was blaming her. Jonathan never did that. He never ever did that. I think he might have done it once with Joe M, but then he changed his mind at the end and was like, actually, I think it might be Stephen. So I think there were times when he did sort of go into classic traitor behaviour, but most of the time, I think he was playing the perfect faithful game as a traitor. So yeah, he played a brilliant game, and I have to give him credit where credit's due, because not many people could survive that many round tables with that many people suspicious of him. But Jonathan did. Anyway, up next we have Celia Imrie. No, I got to put her above Stephen Fry. I've got to. Celia Imrie, so horrendous at this game. So unbelievably horrendous at this game. Oh, I can't put her in strong game then. I can't. I might have to put Celia Imrie up in iconic, you know, because I think she'd have to go in meh, if I'm being 100% honest. Because, again, this was another person that was very, very unwilling to commit to an answer. I'm fairly certain every single round table she voted for somebody different, apart from like maybe once or twice. And she was just unfortunate enough to be sat next to Alan. So technically she got unlucky a little bit. But equally, the reason I put her in iconic is because Celia Imrie, along with somebody else on our list, made this series so brilliant to watch. The moment where she farted, incredible television. The moment where she was wailing into that well, brilliant. The moment where she turns around in that challenge and goes, I'm quite two-faced actually. Incredible TV, like absolutely sensational. And I even just liked her interactions with Kat, with Alan, with other people around the castle. She just seemed so warm and so lovely. And I say this a lot, but like these kind of shows, it's really nice to get to know the actual people that you've been watching on TV for so long. Like Celia Imrie is an absolute icon in this industry. But do we actually know Celia Imrie? I feel like I do after this show. Not personally, obviously, but I know her a little bit better than I did. And I think that's what made her such a great presence on the show. Her gameplay left much to be desired, I have to be honest. I don't think it was incredible gameplay, but it was still decent, I would say. I would say it was a good... yeah, it was good enough, I would say. It was good enough to get her by. And she did vote out Jonathan, so I've got to give her props for that. But the rest of the time, and she did call Kat very early on, to be fair, but everything else was a bit sort of like, oh, I'm just going to vote on vibes. And it was a bit like, oh, okay. And she was certain that Stephen wasn't a faithful, but I was like, how can you be so certain? That doesn't make sense. But anyway, up next we have, is it Kate Garraway? It is Kate Garraway. I'm going to put her at the top of meh. And there's a reason I'm going to put her at the top of meh. Because Kate played the perfect faithful game in terms of how to make it to the end, okay? Was she horrendous at actually calling out traitors? 1000%, and that's why she's been put in meh. If it wasn't for the fact that she was so bad at like actually calling out traitors, she did vote out Jonathan, so I'll give her credit where credit's due, but if it wasn't for the fact that she was so bad, then I would have put her probably up in strong game or even in legendary, purely for the fact that she had suspicion on her day one. She almost went home to Niko, and then the votes just like were kind of ticking away underneath the radar. She kind of had that Freddy effect in season 3 where he was so suspicious at the start and then he just became less suspicious over time, but then he ultimately got banished. And that's the kind of thing that you have to do as a faithful. You have to appear suspicious enough that people think that you're a traitor but don't want to get rid of you, but also suspicious enough that the traitors want to keep you because they believe that you will be banished, but not suspicious enough that people don't want to vote you and want to keep you in the game. So that's what Kate was doing. So from that perspective, I think she played a good game. But she was so horrendously bad at naming traitors that I have to put her in meh. I have to, because I just don't think that she was that good. I really don't think she was that good. And it's a real shame because, yeah, I wanted a lot more from her, but I just loved the fact that she came into this game and she was just like, I'm going to enjoy myself. I'm going to enjoy myself. I'm going to have fun. And that's my vibe for today. That's literally all I'm vibing with. And that's what I'm going on. Vibes. Up next, we have... It's going to be Kat, isn't it? Okay, Kat's going top of strong game. I can't put her in Legendary. I really can't put her in Legendary. And the reason why I can't put her in Legendary is because I think that by the end, she made a couple of moves that really set herself up poorly. Voting out Kate at the end was a really bad move because she was the only woman in the final, and my logic would dictate, and they never actually brought it up, but my logic would dictate that there had to be at least one woman in that castle turret being a traitor. I don't feel like the show would want 3 men, especially after what happened in season 2, where Ash got voted off in like episode 4, and then it was boys clubs the rest of the series. They don't want that again. They want that mix of gender, they want that mix of sex in there, just to spruce it up a bit, give different ideas. So Kat immediately set herself out as the target from that final banishment. And then there were a couple of other things. I feel like, again, the lack of talking at the round table really harmed her game because they used that against her. I said very early on in this series that she was going to end up being the person banished because she was just too quiet and they didn't have any suspicions on anybody else. Kind of like how Mina was voted out and how... Who else was voted out in that way in season 1? Alyssa as well. So it is a shame, and I think that she played a very, very strong game in terms of socially, but I can't put her up in Legendary because I don't feel like she made any bold moves that progressed her game in any way. In anything, she kind of gave the bold moves to Alan, and that progressed his game. And with Jonathan Ross, the reason why he's above her is because he was hounded from literally day 2, day 3, and managed to survive until like day 7, day 8, which is incredible behavior. So I don't think being a good traitor is about making it the furthest. I think it's about how you play. And I think Kat just made a couple of silly errors that unfortunately meant that she had to go. And yeah, it's just unfortunate. But anyway, up next, we're going to have Joe Marler. And Joe Marler's going at the top of Legendary. Bro was sensational. Best traitor of the series. No, best faithful of the series, sorry. Like, genuinely just incredible. I wish he'd trusted his gut earlier on, because he came out with the big dog theory in, like, what? Roundtable 2? And I was like, bro's on the money with it. Bro's on the money. And, yeah, he did come to Kat and Alan a little bit too late, but he still had the money on it. He was on it. He was there. He was with it. I think there are a couple of times that he let himself down with just rogue votes throughout the competition that were just a bit like, no, go with your gut, Joe. But equally, this game is really difficult to go with your gut sometimes because other people can be so persuading. But Joe Marler, absolutely fantastic. Genuinely a sensational player. A great, great competitor. And I would be scared to go up against him in a round table. Bro was so certain all the time. You're a traitor, Jonathan. You're a traitor. I was like, you genuinely cannot be that sure. You can't be. You have to be a traitor. But either way, he's iconic. He's great. David, you're going down at Abysmal. You're going at the bottom of Abysmal, mate. You're going at the bottom of Abysmal. Get down there. Get down there right now. Because not only did you get lucky being in that 50-50 and surviving, but I genuinely don't think that you got a single vote correct this entire competition. And that is so unbelievably frustrating. The only one you got right was Kat. And that was just because Nick told you to vote for Kat in order to ensure your survival. This is what I mean, bro. This is what I mean. I was so disappointed with David. I was like, this is such a frustrating person to watch. Because he's so good at articulating himself, but he's so bad at coming up with correct answers. And that's what was so frustrating about him. He just did not come up with a single correct answer at all. Like, the entire competition, nada, nothing, not a single moment. What are we doing here, guys? Like, actually, come on. Anyway, that is it for David. He can sink at the bottom of Abysmal. And then we have Nick. I'd have to put Nick here. And the reason I'm having to put Nick here is, listen, guys, I was a Nick defender. And then he voted out Joe. And then he decided to end the game. And I was like, bro, You were doing so well up until that point. You were actually going to be my best faithful of the series, I think. And then you made those silly errors, and I just thought, oh, you absolute muppet. So I'm going to have to put him here in strong game. I think up until the final, he played a brilliant game. He was not suspicious to the traitors at all. He had suspicions on Kat from very early on, but kept close to her because obviously then she'd keep him around. There were just so many moves in the game that I was appreciative of because, again, like Steven, he was attempting to do things that would push the game forward. He came up with the I'll let you win thing, and he talked to Joe about we need to stick close to the traitors, who we think are the traitors, because that'll keep us in the game. He's coming up with things that aren't just ambly bumbling through the game, like people like Kate, like David, who are just sort of like, oh yeah, I think it's this person. He was actively making gameplay moves that would ensure his survival as a faithful. And as somebody that made it to the final round table, you have to give him credit where credit's due. Barely anybody had suspicion on him, but yet the traitors didn't want to get rid of him. That kind of gameplay is incredible to watch. He did just let himself down at the last minute, and that's what's really, really upsetting about Nick. So yeah. But then we have our final traitor, Alan. Now, if I was giving Alan, I would put him at the top here, okay? But I'm putting him in Iconic, purely because he was the best part of this show. Now, like I said, he's at the top of Legendary. He was the best trait of this series. He was the best person in this series. He was the most entertaining. I mean, every single episode, it was just joyful to watch what kind of shit would come out of his mouth. And just the references, the comments he'd make, the confessionals he'd have. Just so many funny moments. The entire thing was made because Alan Carr was a traitor. And I can't believe he won. Now, everybody in the comments have been sort of like arguing over, is he a sort of bad traitor and they're just bad faithfuls? Or is he a great traitor and the faithfuls were just hoodwinked by him? I think it's the latter. I genuinely do believe that the first couple of days, yeah, it was a little bit obvious. But I think as soon as he killed Paloma, I think that made him settle into it a little bit more. He was panicked, yes, but he actually settled into it really, really well. He's also the kind of person that didn't let his personality from outside the world drop inside the game. And that's what a lot of people got caught out on. Not traitors-wise, but the other faithful, was that you're different outside of the game. What's happening here? Whereas Alan was exactly the same outside of the game as inside of the game, which made him look like a faithful. He was constantly joking and laughing, yeah, but equally, as a comedian and as someone who's known to, like, laugh at the drop of a hat, I'm not surprised. Do you know what I mean? And if I was in that castle, I also wouldn't think that he was a traitor, purely because I would be like, oh, that's just Alan. Do you know what I mean? That is literally just Alan. So, it's a real tough one. It's a real tough one, but I do genuinely believe that the only person in this competition that had certainty it was Alan was Joe M. Everybody else was like, well, it could be Alan. Like, even Celia was like, it could be Alan. Claire Borden was like, it could be Alan. But nobody was like, it is Alan, apart from Joe M. And that was only in the last episode, which is kind of crazy. So, really, I think he played a fantastic game. He genuinely deserved that win. The way he hoodwinked everybody so easily and so, like, perfectly. I think he must have received, what, 3 total round table nominations, if that even. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think this might be the best traitor game we've seen since Harry, since Cerie. I don't know. This is a very, very good traitor game. Even though it was blatantly obvious to us what he was doing, obviously it's obvious to us. We know he's a traitor. But for people who don't know he's a traitor, it just looks like that's Alan. That's Alan. That's Alan Carr, bestie. It's just Alan. So, really, it's a difficult one when we don't know. Like, we know who the traitors are. It's really difficult to know how to sort of deem what they're finding suspicious and what they're not finding suspicious. But clearly, no one found him suspicious apart from Joe M. And some other people earlier on. But he dealt swiftly with them. Anyway, thank you guys very, very much for watching. I hope you guys have enjoyed. That is my official Traitors ranking. It's a bit of a long one. I kind of rambled a little bit there. So thank you guys for sticking with me through that. But anyway, hope you guys have enjoyed. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you guys later. Keep on ranting. Bye now. See ya.